Hello guys, today I'm going to be talking about my March TBR and you will have to excuse me because I am recovering from a pretty gnarly cold, but the show must go on, so we're going to be rolling through all of the books that I'm going to be reading in March. The excellent news is that this is an all brand new TBR because at this point at the end of February I have one book left on my TBR and I am currently reading it. So that one is Bone Spindle by Leslie Vedder. It is a YA retelling of Sleeping Beauty and it was my Patreon pick for December. I cannot guarantee that I will be completely done with it by the end of February, which is why I am briefly mentioning it here, but at the moment it is my only book remaining on my TBR. I have already started it and it is my only current read. So I finally did it, guys. I finally cleared through my backlog of mandatory reads. And so for this one, we have more than my obligatory monthly books on this TBR. We have 3 of those. We have 2 book club books and we will be picking my Patreon pick for March. But we also have 3 books that I'm reading for funsies. I know, right? Who is she? As well as my regular TBR for March, I am of course also participating in Realmathon. As usual, I am a co-host for this readathon. So if you guys don't know what Realmathon is, it is a month-long readathon that is hosted by Cassidy from Covers with Cassidy. It normally runs in April, but for this month it will be running in March. And every year it has a different theme, but it kind of has a battle structure where you are reading books to either gain points for your own team or to take them away from others. So this one has like a magic school kind of setting, and I am the co-leader for Team Time along with Tori from Tori Between Pages. Now, if you guys are fans of reading vlogs, I would definitely recommend checking out Tori. I pretty much exclusively watch vlogs, hauls and TBRs, and I really love Tori's vlogs and have been watching them for some time, so would really recommend you go ahead and check her out. Now, I am going to leave Cassidy's announcement video down in the description box in case you guys want to check it out, because obviously Cassidy is going to do a much better job of explaining this readathon than I am. But essentially, you don't really need a TBR for this readathon, so it doesn't matter at what point you join. The way that you generate points for this readathon is by checking off a list of prompts, but some of the prompts you won't know that your book has until you've actually read it. So you don't have to think too hard about building a TBR ahead of time. You do get bonus points for each team if you do join Teen Time. I always say Teen Time. If you join Team Time, then you are looking for white books where white is the predominant color of the book cover, and you are also looking for books with objects on the cover, and that will gain you an extra 10 points per book. But once again, you don't have to read exclusively white books or exclusively books with objects on the cover. So throughout this TBR, I'm not going to be showing you guys any specific books for Realmathon, but I am going to let you know like the minimum amount of points for Realmathon that each book I'm reading is going to generate for Team Time. I think this is my 3rd year co-hosting this readathon. I have still yet to win. At this point, I don't think I'm ever going to win, but I have a grand old time participating, and I know that you guys will as well. So into the TBR, because I don't think I have anything else to cover. I have no plans until May, and I am so happy about that. So I am doing nothing apart from renovating my bedroom and reading. That is all. Getting into my TBR, we will start off with those 2 book club reads. The first one is Sharp Ends by Jo Abercrombie. This one is the December and January book. No. What are months? The January and February book for Catch Up Book Club, which is my like epic fantasy book club. The live show for this is going to be at some point in March. We haven't discussed yet. It does, if possible, always fall on the 2nd Sunday of the month though. And this one is a collection of short stories within the world. So I believe that these are set at different points in the First Law universe. Some of them are like before the first trilogy. Some of them are like between installments and they follow like a variety of characters. I believe that the majority of the short stories in here are under 30 pages. I've had a roller coaster of a ride with First Law along. I really like the trilogy, but I don't really like the standalones all that much. And generally, I heavily dislike short stories. So we'll see how this goes. I'm not too stressed about it because I know that some of these are like 10 pages each, which obviously will be a breeze to get through. But the First Law series, if you guys don't know, is a grimdark series that has like an overarching kind of magical plot to do with the immortals of the world, potentially, because I'm not at the end of it yet, so I don't have much of a clue what's going on. But the overall like theme and tone of the series is very nihilistic, like it's very cyclical. It kind of focuses a lot on the futility of humanity and how everything is kind of cyclical in nature and comes back around. So like it can be a bit of a drag to read sometimes when it doesn't always have the happiest or most optimistic outcomes, but I do really enjoy some of the character work that Joe Abercrombie does in this series. This one was also a Christmas gift from Lamia, so thank you very much to Lamia for sending this my way, and this will get me a minimum of 22 points to take away from another team. I do want to say as well that because of this code I'm also operating, like it took me out for a few days. I'm surprised, like if you'd have asked me at this time yesterday I would have said that I would not have been fit to film today. So I am operating on approximately 1.5 brain cells, so if something I say does not make sense then that is very probably why. For my Patreon book club, which is the Alpha Ho book club, we are going to be finishing the Savage Lands series by Stacey Marie Brown, and I'm going to be reading the final installment, which is Shadowlands. This one is book 6 and it is a chunker. It is the biggest one in the series by far. It is nearly 600 pages and this is a apocalyptic type series that is set in Budapest, and it's following a girl who is the ward of the king, and this is a world that has been divided between the realms of like the human and the fae because the veil between the two worlds fell, so they're all kind of on the same plane of existence now, and there was a war that resulted in them living on separate sides of the city. So our main character is a human, and from her position of privilege she steals drugs and medicine from the trains that transport them through the city and puts those onto the black market so that people in need can profit from them instead of it just like lining the pockets of the elite. So one day when she's doing this she's caught and she's thrown into a maximum security prison where she meets like the alluring half-fae warrior Warwick Farkas and realizes that like life isn't as black and white as she kind of assumed it was or was raised to believe that it was. It's a very dark series, lots of torture, like pretty brutal. It's also very repetitive, and while my favorite thing about these books is that they are very compelling, very addictive, very fast reads, by the time we get to book 6 like the novelty is kind of worn off. So I'm very glad for this series to be over. I do believe that Stacey Marie Brown is planning on like a spin-off or maybe like other books in this series, and I did flick through to find the page count yesterday and it says the end of one story is merely the beginning of another is like the last kind of line of this book, where it normally says follow the story in the next book in the series. So I do think something is coming, but at this point like I'm almost certain that I will not be continuing after this installment, but I am very glad that this is going to be over soon because I'm definitely ready to move on to something else. And this one was a gift from the wonderful Ash, so thank you very much to Ash for gifting this one to me, and this one is a heavy hitter for Realmathon. This will get me a minimum of 42 points to add to team time. So next up we will do my last obligatory read, which is going to be my Patreon pick for March. So every member of my inner circle tier on Patreon can recommend a book that gets added to this jar. Every month I pick one out and I aim to read it within like the couple of months that follow me selecting it from the jar. So I managed to catch up. I'm very proud of myself. It's been a long time coming. It's been a while since I've had like a completely empty TBR. So I'm hoping for something that's a relatively easy read from here so that I can continue that streak, but if it was something a little bit more challenging, I mean, I currently have the space in my TBR for it. So let's go with this one, which is yellow. Oh my god, I don't even remember what they mean now. I think yellow is a really old one, which means that it was added before 2023. I can't even read my own writing. The Nowhere Child by Christian White, and this one is Beth's pick. Okay, so I am actually quite excited for this one because it is a thriller. I don't read them often, but when I do, I get through them super quickly because I'm so compelled. That's why I love thrillers. Oh, it's an Australian one as well. Okay, but Missing Child. What? I am so hyped. Okay, so this is set in Australia, but also America, and it is following a woman who gets a phone call that tells her that she is a kid that was abducted in America, and this woman like struggles to believe that the woman that raised her, who was a social worker that died of cancer a few years before, was somebody who kidnapped her from America and took her to Australia. And then it also, I think, is set in 1990 when this kid went missing, following the family after the kid has been abducted as they like slowly fall apart. And then in present day, the woman goes to America to find out about her abduction and this family. So color me intrigued. I do not own this, so I'm gonna have to get myself a copy. I will of course check like all of the usual suspects before I get one, and I also like I've sorted out my library card, so there's a potential I could get this from my library as well. But thank you very much to Beth for this recommendation. I am very much looking forward to it. So for the final 3 books of this TBR, these are the ones that I'm adding because I want to. So I have 2 buddy reads here of books series that I'm very excited to get to and have been for quite some time, and also something that I'm doing myself that is potentially going to be quite challenging. So the challenging one is that Brandon Sanderson is releasing book 5 in the Stormlight Archive in December this year, and I worked out that because I want to reread Stormlight and I need to finish Mistborn Era 2. So if you account for the fact that in the UK the Stormlight Archives books are broken up into 2 halves, I figured out that if I read 1 book per month between now and the release of Stormlight 5, I will have caught up. So for March I'm going to be reading The Bands of Mourning by Brandon Sanderson. This one is book 3 and second era Mistborn, and it is the last thing that I need to read before I can go ahead and reread Stormlight. As you'll know, I'm not the biggest fan of Mistborn Era 2. It has a western tone. It's set like I think about between 150 and 300 years after the events of Mistborn Era 1, and it is following a guy who is a lawmaker, or was a lawmaker, before he had to come back and stand in as like the head of his family. He doesn't want to be in nobility anymore, but he doesn't really have a choice, and he's struggling to leave like this lawmaker past behind. And so when like members of the nobility start to get kidnapped, he starts to involve himself in the investigation. This has lots of like gunfights, train fights, toxic masculinity, and I don't enjoy it. So I'm reading it essentially because it's part of the Cosmere, and it does actually contain important and interesting things about the Cosmere as a whole in here. It's an integral part, but the reason why it's took me so long to catch up with the Cosmere at this point, when I made my way through Stormlight in like 2020 or 2021, is because I dislike Mistborn Era 2 so much. So we're finally just gonna suck it up and get on with it. This one was actually a gift from G a couple of years ago, so thank you so much, G. I'm happy to finally be getting around to it, and for Realmathon this will get me a minimum of 21 points to take away from another team, and I will be listening to the audiobook of that as well. As a buddy read with Beth, we are going to be reading a series that I put on my 2024 TBR for 2024. That's the, yeah, I feel like I said that weird, but I put multiple series on my 2024 TBR. And for the next 3 months, we are going to be buddy reading one of those, which is the Poison Study series by Maria V. Snyder. I am so hyped for this. This is like an OG fantasy romance, and I have had this on my TBR as something that I think I'm going to love for such a long time. So I'm really excited to be starting it, and also that buddy reading it is going to hold me accountable to actually having the series finished sometime soon. So this one, I believe, is fantasy romance. It was published in like 2005, which is way earlier than I actually thought it was. I did get the Fairy Loot special edition of these, but before that I had these like really beat up old paperbacks. I got all of them secondhand, and none of them were in matching editions, as you will see over the coming months. So I'm going to be reading these and then unhauling them as I read them, and just keeping the Fairy Loot editions, providing that I love the series. But this is following a girl who I think is about to be executed for some reason, and she's kind of pulled from the dungeons and set as like, I think it's like the commander of the guards, or like some important influential person's food tester. And as she is in this role, she is taught about poisons and like how to look out for poisons, and I think the romance is between her and like a guard captain. And this one will get me a minimum of 29 points to take away from another team for Realmathon. And then the final book that I'm going to be reading in March is a buddy read with Aaron, who said like, we're due a buddy read, it's been a while. So as we have buddy read the, what's the series called? Can't remember what the series is called, but The Final Strive by Sarah El-Arifi. We've buddy read that series in the past. So I selected our next buddy read, which is going to be Feybound by Sarah El-Arifi. This is one of my most anticipated releases of the year because I love The Final Strife and the Battle Drum so much. Once again, one of the best new fantasy series that I've read in the like recent years. Please go ahead and read that series. And this one I feel is very different. All I remember about it is that I think there are 2 sisters, and they come from the Elven lands, I think, and they're exiled for some reason, and they stumble across the world of the Fae. So I'm very interested in this because it has both elves and Fae. I believe that there's a romantic nature to this story, which I'm always a sucker for, and I know that I really love Sarah El-Arifi's previous books. So this one, pretty convinced. Like, I've heard that the people who like The Final Strife don't think it's quite as good, but they still really enjoy it, so I'm only expecting good things. And then for Realmathon, this will get me a whopping getting 37 points for team time. So this is my TBR for March. I feel like it is pretty doable, but I can confirm that this is not everything that I'm actually going to be reading in the month. I feel like I am getting a little bit too big for my boots because I do have such a free TBR and like no like obligations rolling over, but I can confirm that the first thing that you're going to see, the first vlog that you're going to see from me in March is going to be the second installment of Shelve It or Scrap It, which is a brand new vlog series that I started on my channel. Thank you guys so much for the feedback on that. It was honestly more than I expected, and like so much better than I expected, but I'm really glad that you guys have enjoyed that first episode. Obviously, like I'll link it if you haven't seen it, but obviously if you've seen it, you will know that I have no idea what I'm going to be reading for that, but that is definitely the first thing that I'm going to be tackling in the month before I get to this, and then I have a couple of other plans as well if everything goes to plan. Please don't forget to join Realmathon. We're going to have a great time, and I am, because I'm co-hosting Realmathon, going to be hosting a few public sprints across the month as well, so keep your eyes peeled for that if you are interested. Down in the comments, let me know if you're participating in Realmathon and what team you have joined. And aside from that, guys, please don't forget to like this video if you liked it and subscribe if you wanna. If you head into my description box, you'll find a link to my Goodreads, Instagram and Twitter if you'd like to follow me on any of those, as well as a link to my Bookish candle website, the Etsy for that, and a 10% off discount code. But that's it from me today, guys. Bye!
Oh, you bite your friend like chocolate. You say you'll go where nobody knows, with guns hidden under our petticoats. We're never gonna quit it, no, we're never gonna quit it, no.